Welcome to Symphony 101, an educational series of short videos where some basic questions about orchestra will be answered and some fun facts about symphonic music will be presented. My name is Mariusz Smoli, I'm music director and conductor of Acadiana Symphony Orchestra in Lafayette, Louisiana. Today, let's start with a brief history of symphony orchestra. The first large instrumental groups of various instruments were assembled around year 1600. The first orchestral music was naturally also created in early 1600s, which was the beginning of Baroque period in music. One of the very first creators and leaders of the early orchestra was Italian composer Claudio Monteverdi. He needed large instrumental groups to be part of a new musical form that he helped to develop called opera. The early Baroque orchestras consisted mostly of strings and keyboard, usually the harpsichord, with only occasional use of winds and percussion. Now, let me introduce you to some important composers who brought the orchestra during the history to new heights. First, Ludwig van Beethoven, a famous German composer who perfected the musical form of symphony, enlarged the size of the orchestra, and even included chorus in his last famous Symphony No. 9. Hector Berlioz, a French composer who further enlarged the size of the orchestra by adding additional brass percussion and even multiple harps. Berlioz also created the first so-called program symphony by adding a literary story to the musical narration. The next major expansion of the orchestra happened thanks to another great German composer, Richard Wagner. He not only further enlarged the instrumental forces of the orchestra, particularly by expanding the brass section and even creating a new instruments himself, but he also reshaped the way the orchestra plays, is being organized, and how it can be used in telling a story in a musical drama. During the recent decades, we witnessed expansion of the percussion section and even some experiments with adding electronics. However, the traditional 19th century orchestra remains the most popular and I think the optimal vehicle, or large instrument, so to speak, to beautifully bring together all the various colors of strings, woodwinds, brass and percussion, and to create the one kind of very special, thrilling sound of symphony orchestra. Thank you for being with us today, and I hope you will catch us again for another episode of Symphony 101 with Acadiana Symphony Orchestra.